the Prime Minister is now going to be in one heck of an amount of trouble. She'll be trouble on the front page of the newspapers tomorrow, and she'll be trouble in Parliament next week. Now, I know for a very long time, for what feels like has been years and years, the story about the AWU has been brewing. It's being pushed hard by plenty of people who have pretty obvious political objectives about trying to knock off a Prime Minister. But tonight, we finally get a very clear sense and a clear example of the Prime Minister saying one thing but doing another from her time back as a lawyer at Slater and Gordon. Now, as many of her chief accusers will even willingly admit this evening, this revelation is not a revelation about illegality. It's not about her living the champagne lifestyle on the beer budget with the stolen union money. This one is a straight up and down example about truth, about what actually happened and about what type of person says one thing but seemingly does another. This evening on the ABC, there was some revelations from a former partner of Slater and Gordon, who worked with Julia Gillard back at that period of time in the 1990s. Now, as you know, the Union Fund was used to purchase a property in Fitzroy. The now Prime Minister was involved in the conveyancing file about all of that. But here's the part that is going to be the problem for the Prime Minister. At the very least, a political problem. When I say problem, I don't necessarily mean legal. I'm suggesting the political problem. Because the anatomy of a scandal is that people generally, as soon as they become confused by something, they start to tune out. As soon as something becomes clear and black and white, guess what? They make a decision and they make it pretty bloody quickly. To the revelations that were on TV this evening, here's the suggestion. When Julia Gillard was leaving Slater and Gordon in 1995, in the exit interview, she said that she had had no knowledge of the property deal that was ultimately paid for with this union slush fund money. The only problem is, this evening, the former partner in Slater and Gordon has produced a document from the Commonwealth Bank. It's in relation to the finance of that house purchased with, in part, the union money in Fitzroy, and it's dated 1993. Now, for all of the other documents and allegations and truths and half-truths and bagmen and dodgy people and desperate right-wingers who want to bring down a Prime Minister for their own ego, this one is straight up and down. The Prime Minister said 2 years after she received a document from the Commonwealth Bank that she didn't know anything about it. Now, this will be the problem for the Prime Minister. It'll be tomorrow's front page. It'll be the first question in Parliament when it returns next week, and it will be the focus of the media. This, for a long time, has been a story that, frankly, has been able to be complicated, obfuscated, and people have been able to muddy the waters as much as possible. Now, I, like many, have never been one of those people who wants to pick up the AWU flag and run and place it into the ground and declare this will be the end of the Prime Minister. And I think those who, even after the 7:30 report this evening, were saying that the Prime Minister will be gone by this time next week, that's wishful thinking. The Prime Minister will most likely survive the next week, I have no doubt about it. However, it is going to be very rocky. There'll be a lot of push, a lot of noise, and a lot of fun to watch. Right, let's talk about what happened this evening on the ABC. They had an interview with a former partner of Slater and Gordon. And to reiterate what I was saying before, all of the mountains of documents and the flow charts to try and work out have always, I think, frankly, been a little bit too complicated, rightly or wrongly, too complicated for people to think, well, hang on, is there actually something here? Well, here's a straight up and down. Here he is on the ABC earlier this evening.
There is absolutely no doubt that Ms Gillard not only knew of the Slater and Gordon mortgage in March of 1993, but was specifically involved in taking steps to facilitate that mortgage. Now, that's a matter of documents. It's not a matter of assertion or hearsay. Now, you then have a situation where 2.5 years later, in September of 1995, Ms Gillard is asserting that the first she heard it was a Slater and Gordon mortgage was in August of 1995. Now, it's up to others to make the judgment about her credibility.
Now, Tory, before we unpack exactly what he's saying there, do you agree with me about what I was saying at the start of the show, that the anatomy of a scandal, whether people like it or not, is that it's got to be as simple as possible and a contradiction needs to be as clear and as evident as the one that that partner is bringing forward? And that's why it's going to be an even bigger problem for the Prime Minister next week, because, put simply, it's one that you can explain to people in 3 seconds, and now we understand.
people can finally get it. I feel like we've been playing this giant game of like pass the parcel, where you unwrap it and you get a little nugget here, and sometimes you get nothing, and sometimes there's nothing there. We don't know what's at the middle yet, whether it's a scalp or absolutely nothing. But this is one of those prizes you get halfway through. It's like, oh, that's an interesting one, isn't it? So look, it's something for people to get their teeth into. It'll spur all those conspiracy theorists onwards, I have no doubt. But no, it's certainly a more interesting and solid facts that we can look at here, as opposed to all the nebulous stuff we've been mucking around with for a while now. Because
what I was interested in here, Mark, is that some of the Prime Minister's chief critics and those that have been running around and pushing the line as hard as possible and waving as many documents have said this evening the core of the issue is, should somebody who, if you look at it like that, says one thing but does another as egregiously and obviously as that way back when, is that the right type of person to be Prime Minister? And I thought that was interesting, that the chief critics are now showing their hand that it's a matter of trust, not what has been heavily murkied for a while here, which was champagne lifestyle, beer budget with stolen money.
It's always a bit scary when a lawyer gets involved. Suddenly they have credibility and they're very pedantic. And his point's a pedantic one, but as you say, it's clarifying. So I think this is extremely dangerous for her. I don't know that it goes to character or whether she lied or not. I'm sure I received a document in 1995 that indicated I knew something in 1993, but probably didn't open it. But this is explosive, as is the Malaysian guy. Who, is offering his services. It is nevertheless explosive, and I think she's in deep trouble over this. Even though she's fronted up, I mean, she did an incredible performance 3 months ago.
Her best press conference is becoming PM.
Yes, and yet there's still something hanging over it now that I think will widen.
Well, mate, I see you looking at me. In fact, before we go any further, I actually have to say I was wrong. Last time I was on this show, I said, oh, look, this is probably the last we'll hear of this scandal. It's probably the dullest political scandal in Australian history. Yeah. It's all moved on. Why is the Australians still flogging a dead horse? Well, tonight it's looking like a different story.
Yeah, and see, this is my thing, is that, Mark, you've investigated all sorts of things, and I can hear people that will be screaming at the television saying, we have been feeling like this for months and you dickheads have only just worked it out, put simply. Yeah. I'm sure my boss will love that as a description, but still,
it's a broad brushstroke.
Yeah, correct. But there would be
interesting
people
watching the characters come out there. I mean, it's a great narrative. You know, like you pull a string, and it's the source of great journalism. You pull a string, and then suddenly people. And why do they wait till now? Why does a former partner wait till now?
Well, and that's what always seems fascinating about this story, and no doubt when we talk to Mark Latham on Monday, we'll have a different perspective on it. And I'm looking forward to that on Monday. It'll be a ding dong again on Monday evening here. But my thing with all of these sorts of stories is that the cleaner the allegation that you can make against someone, with the more people collaborating it, and not just the pieces of paper, but the more people willing to front up. And the visual nature of the way the media works is that you can have as many people with as many bits of paper as possible, but it's when people start standing in front of TV cameras that it seems to really sink through to the population. Is it unfair of me to say that the anatomy of a scandal is you can have all the documents you want, it's when you've got the talking heads that it starts to change?
Well, what a talking head, though. I mean, this guy... What did he really say? I mean, to summarise, what did he say? Well, it's a little bit obscure, but he's got enormous gravitas.
He did the great thing. It's not for me to say. It's not for me to make this conclusion. Yes. But the point you make, too, is it was a rather nebulous scandal to get your head around. I described it as the dullest scandal I can remember. But now it's come down to one point that, which is, as Tori said, you can say, she said this, it looks like it didn't happen that way.
And this is the thing. So next week in Parliament, Tory, no doubt this becomes the sharp point. It's pretty obvious the Prime Minister stands up and says, well, what are you talking about? I did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. Now, that may well be 100% true. It may be 100% true in the legal sense and anything else. But in the media sense, it just doesn't work like that. What does Julia Gillard have to do to confront this? Does she sit down with your Hedley Thomases of this world and go, all right, you've got me for an hour, go? What does she have to do? Because even if she stood up in Parliament for an hour, I don't think that she can confront anything and actually put it to bed until a chief accuser looks her in the eye and asks question after question after question. As a simple media strategy, she needs not just to stand up in front of the press gallery who have zero knowledge of what's coming, but she needs to sit opposite somebody who's fully armed, doesn't she?
Who?
I don't know. I reckon the first thing she needs to do is to have another one of those press conferences. It's an interesting weapon, isn't it? Like, I'm going to stand here, you can ask any question you want, and I'm not leaving until there's no more questions left. And she's quite generous with her time in press conference. So she can start with that, and, you know, Hedley Thomas can be there and just try and narrow it down to those specific questions, which actually Hedley Thomas has done in The Australian. These are the questions that need answering. Be specific, get specific answers to specific questions, and stop all this, there are questions, there's a smell, it's all dodgy. Like, let's just get specific and be organised, and she needs to front up to that.
Because, Mark, there seems to be a tactic. Now, there's a double tactic here about people sort of enjoying this going as long as it's possibly going, which is that the strategy of the Prime Minister's office is to slowly but surely release statements based off specific questions that are fairly generic. Occasionally the Prime Minister will bat it away at a press conference pointing back to the 51-minute press conference, but conversely, chief accusers in the media and the Prime Minister, we all know, puts a fax out saying where she will be at X o'clock, turn up if you've got any questions. But we don't see the very same people who do seem to make a lot of the fact of, well, here's the list of questions I've emailed the Prime Minister. I say, as part of the grunt work, is go and front her at a press conference.
Well, I mean, it's good.
Don't you have to?
It's good tally. It's like chasing the pool salesman, across the fence. I don't know that it gets you. I mean, I've done that. You know, Mr. Howard. You know, you say that, and what's he going to do?
But the whole thing is that if you have been, I'm not saying as the first point, but if you have been consistently making a case in print, if you have been showing everyone, here are my questions, and I'm getting bugger all response.
You're talking about Hedley.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't there a point where a reporter has to turn up to one of the endless... I mean, we know where the PM will be for an entire week. Big building, flag on it next week. Yeah. You turn up, don't you?
But also, too, for her sake, if something like that doesn't happen, it's going to take the oxygen out of any statement or any announcement she's going to make within the next fortnight.
I don't think she's running from it. She's a smart woman. She's got clever advisors. She'll front up and she'll answer the question. What? I mean, I'm going back a little. Yeah. At the base of it, though, have we heard her say, "I'm disgusted that this fund was set up, that I, as a lawyer, was involved in setting up this fund that was taking money from developers into the pockets of corrupt trade union officials"? Has she said that? I don't know. Has she been asked that? I don't know.
But also, different elements about all of this too, Tory, haven't actually been confronted. And I think that I think that you've really got to separate, and I mean this, as passionate as people are, you've got to separate the waves after waves after waves of political invective that's on the internet, and then you can have a look at the stuff that actually makes it to the printed press that's not full of the same colourful and exciting language, but still it's a different case being made. But we need to make it very clear here too, is that, as has been established, is that union members' money wasn't flogged here. It was money that came from Tees, and the very company who lost all that money has never actually made a formal complaint about it.
Well, various people have had a shot at setting out what's actually been established and what hasn't, and various timelines and what questions have been answered, what questions haven't been answered, but they all seem to disagree just slightly with each other, and then people start bringing the credibility of different people into it. So, look, you know, on a slight tangent, maybe the media needs to agree that they'll just, you know, part like the Red Sea, let Hedley Thomas to the front of the media pack and let him just pepper, maybe Mark Baker needs a shot as well, but let those journos who have been forensically following this ask the questions, because otherwise maybe you do just perpetuate that nebulous nature of it, with everyone kind of going, oh, but what about, you know, this, you know, Bruce Wilson's other thing that he did 20 years ago or whatever.
Well, and here's the other thing, Mikey, too, and I've got to give Nathan some credit for this, who just suggested it on Twitter as an idea, is best course, she admits a mistake, she humbles herself, the shock takes all of the wind out of the sails and gets itself through the next week. Because, of course, no one has alleged a crime, they have just alleged poor judgment.
Sloppiness.
Correct.
And filing sloppiness. Mark and I were talking before the program too. You know, if you want comedy gold, all you need is a right-wing union and what they've been doing for the past 15 years. I mean, it just keeps coming up. It's the gift that keeps giving.
Yeah, correct. But what about that as an idea here? Is that if no one has made the allegation, and even her harshest critics, and I'm talking about the Andrew Bolts of this world, who I know watches the program, g'day Andrew, is that he said, well, I'm not making any suggestion about a crime, I'm not making any suggestion about a crime, it's all about her judgment and character, and the character of that person to then be Prime Minister. do you then go in the Sunday papers saying, I was wrong, I am sorry?
I think that it reaches a point where you can do nothing. I mean, the attack on her from the right and from the right-wing media is very much following the American strategy, which saw the character assassination of Clinton and saw just the most absurd things said about Obama. I guess there comes a point, if it gets that extreme, where you actually just say, I've said all I can say, and you write it out, and you hope you've got enough electoral strength to do that, because some of these things are unanswerable. And I think she can just, be as honest as she can and say what she,
And Paul makes the point too, there has been, and not just in the past year, but the past few years, absolute madness going around out in cyberspace.
Oh, absolutely.
Lunacy.
And it's that thing, and it's easy to link and say, these are the heroes and have them on the show. Put simply, no, I won't. I'll have plenty of other people on the show, but I'm not going to put them on here. And can I also just, too, I've noticed a few people already on Twitter suggesting that this conversation has been lefties trying to defend the Prime Minister. I'd imagine it's been relatively critical for the past 15 minutes. And just final say on all of this here, Tori, do you not get the sense as well is that unless you are 1,000,000% on the attack, people will jump down your throats and pretend you're part of the conspiracy? I don't think you're part of a vast left-wing conspiracy known as News Corporation, or News Limited, rather.
Oh, thanks for that, Paul. Yeah, totally. But that's also because there's this echo chamber of the internet where people go off and they read these crazy ranting blogs. And I'm not talking about Andrew Bolt there. I'm talking about, we all know who we're talking about. There are people spreading all kinds of crazy crap online. And then they talk to each other about it, and then they come on other blogs and they sort of feed off each other. And so they convince themselves that there is this entire conspiracy theory. And so anyone who doesn't buy into that is just some, apologist for the Prime Minister, as opposed to maybe people who are waiting for a bit more evidence before they jump to some fairly crazy conclusions.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, wishful thinking isn't actually enough of a reason to go to print. That's generally the way that I found it.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, damn it. Oh.